Our story begins in the earliest moments of human existence. Tens of thousands of years ago, prehistoric man wandered through the dense forests and open plains, naked and vulnerable. With no homes, fire, or language, they survived on raw fruits, seeds, berries, and occasionally the carcasses of animals. Theirs was a life of sheer survival, characterized by a poor, nasty, brutish, and short existence. But humankind is resourceful. Slowly, over the course of millennia, they began to sharpen stones, turning them into rudimentary tools and weapons, giving rise to the earliest spears and knives. These tools, found in regions like England and France, are the oldest surviving traces of early human effort, some dating back hundreds of thousands of years. As time passed, the invention of fire changed the fate of prehistoric man, allowing him to cook food and keep warm. The late Stone Age brought the domestication of animals, the crafting of wooden shelters, and the first examples of art, including paintings on the walls of caves in France and Spain. Now let's move to Egypt, where one of the earliest great civilizations arose. Egypt was centered around the mighty Nile River, which every year flooded the surrounding lands, depositing fertile soil and allowing for a thriving agricultural society. Egypt's first great ruler was Menes, around 3400 BCE, who united the region and laid the foundation for over 3,000 years of dynastic rule. The Egyptians were pioneers in many ways, but their crowning achievement was the construction of the pyramids. Built around 2900 BCE, these massive stone structures were not just tombs for kings, but also symbols of their mastery over architecture and engineering. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, covers 13 acres and originally stood nearly 500 feet tall. It contains over 2.3 million blocks of limestone, each weighing as much as 2.5 tons. Egyptians believed in life after death and took extraordinary measures to ensure their place in the next world. Mummification was key to preserving the body, and their tombs were filled with treasures including furniture, chariots, and food, to be enjoyed in the afterlife. Kings like Ramses II, who reigned around 1250 BCE, left behind grand monuments such as the colossal statues at Abu Simbel as eternal testaments to their greatness. While Egypt was flourishing along the Nile, another great civilization arose between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamia. By 3000 BCE, the Sumerians had settled in the fertile lands of southern Mesopotamia, building irrigation canals, growing wheat and barley, and establishing the world's first cities. Around 2100 BCE, Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, unified the region and created one of history's first sets of written laws, Hammurabi's Code. This code, inscribed on stone, established a legal framework that would influence later civilizations. However, after Hammurabi's reign, Babylon fell into decline and the region saw a new power rise, Assyria. Assyria, known for its military prowess, dominated Mesopotamia and beyond between 1100 and 600 BCE. Assyrian kings like Tiglath-Pileser III and Sennacherib expanded their empire westward, making Nineveh one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Assyria's strength lay in its iron weapons, siege engines, and ruthless military campaigns. But Assyria's greatness was not to last. In 612 BCE, a coalition of Medes and Babylonians sacked Nineveh, marking the end of Assyrian dominance. Babylon rose again under King Nebuchadnezzar II, who is most famous for constructing the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. During his reign, Nebuchadnezzar also destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BCE, taking many of its people into captivity in Babylon. By 1000 BCE, the Greeks had settled into small city-states, each a self-contained world with its own government, military, and gods. This period marked the birth of higher Greek culture. Though they started as nomadic shepherds, the Greeks developed a remarkable civilization. They learned the alphabet from Phoenician traders, laying the foundation for Greek literature. Trade and colonization expanded Greek influence far and wide, from the Black Sea to Sicily. Cities such as Syracuse in Sicily and Massilia, modern-day Marseille in southern France, became powerful centers of Greek culture. The use of iron, the establishment of colonies, and advancements in art, pottery, and craftsmanship all pointed to a burgeoning society. By the late 6th century BCE, Greece faced a monumental challenge from the vast Persian Empire. In 546 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus conquered the Ionian Greek cities in Asia Minor, sparking a revolt. The conflict escalated when Darius V launched the first Persian invasion of Greece in 490 BCE. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the Athenians achieved a stunning victory at the Battle of Marathon under the leadership of Miltiades. The threat of Persia did not end there. In 480 BCE, Darius's successor Xerxes led a massive invasion force. Yet through the combined efforts of Athens and Sparta, the Greeks triumphed again. The naval battle of Salamis, orchestrated by Themistocles, saw the destruction of the Persian fleet. A year later, at the Battle of Plataea, the Greeks decisively defeated the Persian army. These victories not only saved Greece from conquest, but also allowed Athens to rise as the preeminent power in the Aegean, establishing the Delian League and laying the groundwork for its empire. The 5th century BCE, often called the Golden Age of Athens, was dominated by the leadership of Pericles, who ruled from 460 to 429 BCE. During his time, Athens became the cultural and intellectual heart of the Greek world. The Parthenon, dedicated to Athena, was constructed during this period, adorned with the masterful sculptures of Phidias. Athens became synonymous with philosophy, drama, and the arts. Pericles also strengthened Athenian democracy, introducing reforms that allowed even the poorest citizens to participate in government. The city thrived under his leadership, but the Peloponnesian War with Sparta ultimately strained Athens. After nearly 30 years of conflict, the war ended in 404 BCE with the defeat and fall of Athens' empire. Despite their shared victories against Persia, the Greek city-states were never truly united. Athens and Sparta's rivalry escalated into the Peloponnesian War, a brutal conflict that weakened both sides. The war saw Athens devastated by plague and internal strife, while Sparta, with Persian support, eventually triumphed. The constant warfare among the Greeks made them vulnerable to outside powers, paving the way for the rise of Macedon. Under King Philip II, Macedon gradually absorbed the weakened city-states, unifying Greece under his rule. Philip's son, Alexander the Great, inherited a unified Greece and set his sights on the vast Persian Empire. In 334 BCE, Alexander launched a campaign that would forever change the world. Within a decade, he conquered the Persian Empire, extending Greek influence from Egypt to India. Alexander's conquest ushered in the Hellenistic Age, a period marked by the blending of Greek and Eastern cultures. The cities founded by Alexander, such as Alexandria in Egypt, became centers of learning and culture, where Greek art, philosophy, and science flourished alongside local traditions. The Hellenistic world would endure for centuries, influencing the Roman Empire and the development of Western civilization. The story of the Greeks is one of remarkable achievements, from their humble beginnings as herders to the creation of a culture that would shape the course of Western history. Their advancements in philosophy, art, politics, and warfare set the stage for much of what we consider the foundation of modern civilization. Through their struggles and triumphs, the Greeks left an indelible mark on the world, one that continues to inspire today. In the early days of Rome, the city was merely one small player in the grand drama of the Mediterranean world. However, by the time the Romans conquered Italy, they had established a powerful foothold. The rise of Rome began with its dominance over neighboring tribes and cities, leading to its control over the Italian peninsula by 275 BCE. This conquest was not just a matter of military strength, it was driven by Rome's unique method of incorporating the people they defeated into their growing empire. Allies were often allowed a degree of autonomy, but were required to provide soldiers for Roman wars. The greatest challenge to Roman power in the Western Mediterranean came from Carthage, a Phoenician city-state located in modern-day Tunisia. Carthage was a commercial empire, wealthy and powerful, ruling the seas with its navy and controlling trade across the region. Tensions between the two powers boiled over into a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars, which would shape the future of the Mediterranean. The First Punic War, which lasted from 264 to 241 BCE, erupted over control of Sicily, and although Rome was initially inexperienced in naval warfare, it adapted quickly. After several long and brutal battles, Rome emerged victorious, marking its first major expansion beyond the Italian peninsula. But the most famous conflict, the Second Punic War, which spanned from 218 to 201 BCE, brought the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal into the spotlight. Hannibal's audacious march across the Alps with elephants remains one of history's most daring military maneuvers. Despite his initial successes, including the devastating Roman defeat at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, Hannibal was ultimately outmaneuvered by the Roman general Scipio Africanus. The decisive Battle of Zama in 202 BCE ended Carthage's power, and Rome became the dominant force in the western Mediterranean. With Carthage defeated, Rome turned its attention eastward, extending its influence over Greece and Macedonia. This expansion into the Hellenistic world brought new wealth and cultural influences into Rome, but it also introduced new challenges. As Roman dominion grew, so did the power of its generals and the wealth of its elites, sowing the seeds of future conflicts. This period of conquest came at a high cost. The influx of wealth from newly acquired territories widened the gap between Rome's rich and poor. Rome's provinces were often misgoverned, with Roman governors exploiting their territories for personal gain. This exploitation and the growing wealth of the elite led to social unrest back in Italy. By the late 2nd century BCE, Rome was plunged into a period of political instability known as the Century of Revolution. The brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus attempted to reform the Roman system by redistributing land to the poor, but their efforts were violently opposed by the Senate. Both brothers were assassinated, sparking a century of civil strife. The final collapse of the Roman Republic came in the wake of power struggles between ambitious military leaders. Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla clashed in the early 1st century BCE, marking the beginning of a series of civil wars. Julius Caesar, one of Rome's greatest generals, eventually rose to prominence, crossing the Rubicon in 49 BCE, an act of defiance that plunged Rome into further conflict. Caesar's eventual assassination in 44 BCE did not restore the Republic, but instead led to more turmoil. Out of the chaos, Julius Caesar's adopted heir Octavian emerged as the unchallenged ruler of Rome. In 27 BCE, he became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, marking the official end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus presided over an era of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, which lasted for the next 2 centuries. Under his rule, Rome's borders stretched from Britain to the Sahara, from Spain to the Middle East. Successive emperors, including Tiberius, Claudius, and Nero, expanded and solidified the empire. Under the 5 good emperors, especially Trajan and Hadrian, the empire reached its greatest territorial extent. Marcus Aurelius, the last of these emperors, is remembered as a philosopher king, governing wisely during a period of relative stability. However, the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE marked the beginning of a long decline. His son Commodus was a poor ruler, and his assassination led to a period of chaos. For nearly a century, Rome was plagued by military uprisings, economic instability, and barbarian invasions. During this time, more than 20 emperors came and went, most of them through violent means. In an attempt to restore order, Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into east and west in 285 CE, recognizing that it had grown too large to govern effectively from a single capital. This division laid the groundwork for what would eventually become 2 separate empires, with the Western Roman Empire collapsing in 476 CE and the Eastern Roman Empire, known as Byzantium, continuing for another 1,000 years. The period following the collapse of Charlemagne's empire was marked by disorder. His empire was divided among his descendants, leading to a fragmented political structure that struggled to maintain peace. With no strong central authority, local lords and nobles began to assert their power. This system, known as feudalism, became the dominant social and political structure in medieval Europe. Feudalism was based on a hierarchy of loyalty and land ownership. Kings granted land to their most loyal subjects, who in turn would grant portions of that land to their own vassals. In exchange for land, vassals promised military service. Castles were built to protect these feudal lords from constant warfare, both among themselves and from external threats. The medieval church was not only a religious institution, but also a political one, often clashing with the secular rulers of Europe. One of the most significant power struggles occurred between the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor. In the 11th century, Pope Gregory VII sought to assert the church's independence by prohibiting secular rulers from appointing bishops. This led to a bitter conflict known as the investiture controversy, particularly with Emperor Henry IV. The Pope eventually excommunicated Henry, leading to a famous incident at Canossa in 1077, where Henry humbly sought forgiveness from the Pope. The Church also played a vital role in the governance of Europe, maintaining vast lands and wealth. By asserting spiritual authority over kings and princes, the Pope could wield incredible influence, even deposing monarchs who disobeyed church directives. England's story took a dramatic turn in 1066 with the Norman Conquest, when William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, crossed the English Channel and defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings. This event fundamentally altered English society, as the Normans imposed a new feudal system and brought French influence to the English court. In France, the Capetian dynasty gradually solidified power, beginning with Hugh Capet in the 10th century. However, much of France remained under the control of powerful feudal lords, such as the Dukes of Normandy and Burgundy. The long-standing conflict between England and France over territorial claims in France, known as the 100 Years' War, erupted in the 14th century, leading to periods of devastation but also to the rise of figures like Joan of Arc, who helped lead France to victory. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem and other parts of the Holy Land from Muslim control. Thousands of knights and commoners from across Europe took up the cross, and by 1099 they had captured Jerusalem. However, subsequent crusades were less successful. The Second Crusade, from 1147 to 1150, ended in failure, and despite later efforts, the Muslims under Saladin recaptured Jerusalem in 1187. The Crusades had profound consequences for Europe. They exposed Europeans to new cultures and ideas from the East, including advancements in science, medicine, and philosophy. However, they also led to increased intolerance and the persecution of non-Christians, particularly Jews. The Church also faced internal challenges from heresy. Movements such as the Cathars in southern France were deemed heretical for their rejection of Church doctrine. In response, the Church launched the Albigensian Crusade, which lasted from 1209 to 1229 to suppress heresy. At the same time, the Church saw the rise of the mendicant orders, such as the Franciscans and Dominicans, who sought to live lives of poverty and service while combating heresy through preaching and education. The First Crusade, called by Pope Urban II in 1095, was a surprising success. Despite being poorly organized, the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099 after a bloody siege. The establishment of Crusader states in the Levant, such as the Kingdom of Jerusalem, would survive for nearly a century. The Second Crusade, launched in 1147, was far less successful. Intended to reinforce the Crusader states, it ended in failure when the Crusaders were defeated in Anatolia. The fall of Jerusalem to Saladin in 1187 prompted the Third Crusade, led by figures such as Richard the Lionheart, but even these later efforts failed to restore Christian control over the Holy Land. In response, the Church launched campaigns against heretics, such as the Albigensian Crusade. The Franciscans, founded by Saint Francis of Assisi, and the Dominicans, founded by Saint Dominic, played a crucial role in preaching, educating the faithful, and combating heresy. These friars lived in poverty and traveled widely, reinforcing the Church's teachings across Europe. The life of medieval people was predominantly rural, with the vast majority residing in the countryside. Most of Europe was organized around manors, large estates owned by feudal lords, abbots, or bishops. These estates, known as villes or manors, were self-sufficient, producing most of what was needed for daily life. On these manors, peasants worked the land as serfs. They did not own their fields but were bound to the land, required to provide labor and pay dues to their lord. This system of labor was strictly regulated. For example, a serf might owe his lord 3 days of work each week and a variety of crops, animals, or money at certain times of the year. The serfs had little freedom and could not marry without their lord's permission, and their lives were often arduous, living in small, dark houses that offered little comfort. While life in the country dominated, towns began to re-emerge around the 12th century, particularly in areas that were fortified for protection. Towns were often built near manors or monasteries, where trade and craft began to flourish. Despite their growth, towns remained small and were often subject to the control of local lords, with town dwellers facing many restrictions that limited their freedoms. As trade increased, the use of money began to replace the older barter system. This shift allowed serfs to buy their freedom, as many preferred to pay their lords a sum of money rather than provide labor. The commerce spurred the development of guilds, associations of tradesmen who organized to protect their interests, regulate trade, and set quality standards for goods. The Middle Ages also saw significant developments in literature and science, albeit initially constrained by the dominance of the Church, which preserved much of the knowledge from the ancient world. Books were mostly written in Latin, and literacy was confined to the clergy and a select few. With the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, the spread of books increased dramatically, allowing for a wider dissemination of knowledge. The first major book printed was the Bible, completed in 1456. By 1500, millions of volumes had been printed, breaking the church's monopoly on information and enabling a broader audience to access literature. Scientific inquiry was limited during the early Middle Ages, dominated by astrology and alchemy, which were seen as legitimate forms of knowledge. However, as the Renaissance approached, scholars began to revive interest in classical texts, leading to a gradual shift toward more empirical approaches to knowledge. The Hundred Years' War, spanning from 1337 to 1453, was a pivotal conflict between England and France, rooted in territorial disputes and claims to the French throne. It began when Edward III of England claimed the French crown through his mother, leading to a protracted series of battles. Key battles marked this long struggle, including the famous Battle of Crécy in 1346, where English longbowmen defeated the French knights, showcasing a shift in military tactics and technology. The war saw several ups and downs for both sides, but ultimately, it was marked by the resilience of the French. One of the most significant figures to emerge during this time was Joan of Arc, a peasant girl who claimed divine guidance to lead French forces. Her leadership inspired the French army to several important victories, including the lifting of the siege at Orléans in 1429. However, she was captured and executed by the English in 1431. The war concluded with the French gradually reclaiming lost territories, culminating in the expulsion of the English from most of France by 1453. This conflict significantly altered the political landscape of both nations, leading to the strengthening of centralized royal power in France and laying the groundwork for future English governance. As England and France were embroiled in war, Italy experienced a cultural flourishing known as the Renaissance. This period, which began in the 14th century, marked a revival of interest in the classical art, literature, and learning of ancient Greece and Rome. Italian city-states such as Florence, Venice, and Milan became vibrant centers of trade and culture. Florence, under the patronage of the Medici family, became the heart of Renaissance art and humanism, attracting talents such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. The Renaissance not only transformed the arts, but also fostered a new spirit of inquiry and humanism, where individuals began to seek knowledge for its own sake, leading to advancements in science, exploration, and philosophy. This cultural shift spread across Europe, setting the stage for the modern era. The seeds of the Protestant revolt were sown in the early 16th century, a time when the Catholic Church was embroiled in scandal and corruption. At the heart of this upheaval was Martin Luther, a German monk and theologian whose growing dissatisfaction with the Church's practices ignited a firestorm of reform. Luther's discontent reached a boiling point with the Church's sale of indulgences, which were marketed as a means for the faithful to reduce punishment for sins. In 1517, Luther famously nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. These theses criticized the Church's practices and questioned the Pope's authority. Luther argued that salvation could be attained through faith alone, rejecting the notion that good works could earn God's favor. This act marked the beginning of a widespread movement that challenged the Church's hegemony across Europe. The response from the Church was swift. In 1520, Pope Leo X issued a papal bull condemning Luther's teachings and demanding his recantation. Luther's rejection of the papal authority only intensified his followers' resolve. By 1521, he was summoned to the Diet of Worms, where he famously declared, "Here I stand, I can do no other," refusing to recant his writings unless convinced by Scripture. The Diet resulted in the Edict of Worms, which declared Luther an outlaw and heretic, yet he found refuge among sympathetic German princes, particularly Frederick the Wise of Saxony. The revolt rapidly gained momentum, with many German states embracing Lutheranism. The Church's hold over Germany began to erode as princes saw the potential to assert their independence from Rome, seize church lands, and gain greater political power. Parallel to Luther's movement in Germany, similar revolts took shape in Switzerland and England. In Switzerland, Huldrych Zwingli emerged as a leading reformer, initiating changes in the church in Zurich in the 1520s. Zwingli sought to establish a reformed faith based on the Bible alone, which resonated with many disillusioned with the Catholic Church. His reforms included the abolition of clerical celibacy and the removal of images and relics from churches. However, Zwingli's reforms faced staunch opposition from the Catholic cantons, leading to the first armed conflict between Protestants and Catholics at Kappel in 1531, where Zwingli was killed. This tragic event left the Protestant cause fragmented in Switzerland, as various cantons could not agree on religious matters. Across the English Channel, the Protestant Reformation took a different turn under King Henry VIII. Initially a staunch defender of Catholicism, Henry broke with Rome in the 1530s not primarily over theological issues, but rather due to his desire for a male heir and his frustration with the Pope's refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. This schism led to the Act of Supremacy in 1534, declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. The dissolution of monasteries followed, resulting in the redistribution of their wealth and lands. Under Henry's son, Edward VI, England experienced further Protestant reforms. The Book of Common Prayer was introduced, and Protestant doctrines gained traction. However, following Edward's death, his half-sister Mary I ascended the throne, seeking to restore Catholicism and persecuting Protestants, earning her the moniker Bloody Mary. The religious upheaval led to brutal conflicts across Europe. In France, tensions between Catholics and Huguenots, or French Protestants, erupted into a series of civil wars. The Edict of Nantes in 1598, issued by Henry IV, sought to bring an end to these conflicts by granting limited religious freedom to Huguenots, though it was a temporary solution. The 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 marked one of the most devastating conflicts driven by religious strife. This war began as a local Bohemian revolt against the Habsburg rule and escalated into a broader European conflict involving various states and religious factions. The war saw shifting alliances, with Catholic powers like Spain and Protestant forces from Sweden and France playing critical roles. The conflict culminated in the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which not only brought an end to the 30 Years' War, but also established a new order in Europe based on the principle of state sovereignty and the coexistence of different religions. The 17th century in England was characterized by a tumultuous struggle between the monarchy and parliament, a conflict that would ultimately redefine the relationship between the two. At the start of this period, King James I, who ascended the throne in 1603, asserted the divine right of kings, believing that his authority came directly from God. He famously stated that he was the master of every one of his subjects and could make any law without consulting Parliament. This conflict intensified under James's son, Charles I, who began his reign in 1625. Charles's attempts to rule without Parliament and his imposition of taxes without consent led to significant discontent among his subjects. In 1628, Parliament responded by drafting the Petition of Right, a document that sought to limit the king's power and protect the rights of subjects against arbitrary rule. However, Charles's refusal to adhere to the petition escalated tensions. In 1629, after dissolving Parliament and attempting to govern unilaterally for 11 years, Charles faced increasing opposition. The political landscape was further complicated by religious strife, as his marriage to a Catholic princess alarmed Protestant factions within England. The situation escalated into the English Civil War in 1642, pitting the Royalists, or Cavaliers, against the Parliamentarians, known as Roundheads. The war resulted in a series of battles, culminating in the defeat of Charles I, who was captured and ultimately executed in 1649. Following his execution, England was declared a Commonwealth under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell, marking a significant shift in governance. While England grappled with its internal struggles, France experienced the reign of Louis XIV, who ruled from 1643 to 1715. Louis XIV sought to consolidate absolute power, famously stating, "L'État, c'est moi," I am the state. He believed in the divine right of kings, viewing his authority as a direct mandate from God. Under his rule, France emerged as a dominant European power, but at great cost. Louis expanded French territory through a series of wars, including the invasion of the Spanish Netherlands and conflicts with various European coalitions. His ambitious building projects, most notably the Palace of Versailles, symbolized the grandeur of his reign, but also drained the royal treasury, contributing to the financial crisis that would plague France in the following century. His ambitious building projects, most notably the Palace of Versailles, symbolized the grandeur of his reign, but also drained the royal treasury, contributing to the financial crisis that would plague France in the following century. While Louis XIV enjoyed immense power, his wars left France exhausted and impoverished. By the time he died, he had transformed France into a central power in Europe. Yet the burdens of his extravagant reign set the stage for future unrest. As England and France were embroiled in their struggles, two other powers were emerging in Europe: Russia and Prussia. Under Peter the Great, who ruled from 1682 to 1725, Russia underwent a dramatic transformation. Peter sought to modernize and westernize Russia, learning from the advancements in Europe. He implemented sweeping reforms in the military and government, built a new capital, St. Petersburg, and established a navy. Peter's military campaigns against Sweden allowed Russia to gain access to the Baltic Sea, thus marking its entry as a European power. Prussia, under the leadership of the Hohenzollerns, began its rise as a formidable force in Europe during this period as well. Frederick William I, known as the Soldier King, focused on building a strong military state, setting the stage for his son Frederick II, known as Frederick the Great. Through astute diplomacy and military prowess, Frederick the Great would come to dominate European affairs, particularly during the War of the Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War, further solidifying Prussia's status as a significant power. By the late 17th century, England had begun to assert itself as the Queen of the Ocean. The nation's maritime supremacy was solidified through a combination of naval power and colonial expansion. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 marked the beginning of England's naval dominance, allowing it to expand its trade routes and colonies across the globe. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which ended the War of the Spanish Succession, further established England's maritime supremacy. The treaty not only secured territories in North America and the Caribbean, but also laid the groundwork for England's global influence in the centuries to come. America and the Caribbean, but also granted England Gibraltar, which remains a strategic naval base. This expansion enabled England to control significant trade routes, setting the stage for its future as a global power. The 18th century was a time of significant change across Europe. While countries grappled with the legacies of absolutism and emerging ideas of constitutional governance, social conditions remained varied. In England, the Enlightenment began to take root, emphasizing reason and individual rights, influencing political thought and leading to calls for reform. Meanwhile, serfdom persisted in Eastern Europe, where the conditions of peasants were often dire, echoing the structures of the medieval past. In France, discontent simmered beneath the surface of Louis XIV's grandeur. The financial burdens of war, coupled with oppressive taxation and a growing awareness of Enlightenment ideals among the populace, foreshadowed the upheaval that would come in the following century. By 1789, the financial crisis had reached a boiling point. France's involvement in the American Revolution had drained the treasury, and the king's efforts to reform the tax system met with fierce resistance from the privileged classes. Louis called for the Estates General, a legislative assembly representing the three estates of France: clergy, nobility, and commoners, in May 1789, hoping to quell unrest by addressing grievances. However, this call would instead unleash the revolutionary fervor simmering beneath the surface. The Third Estate, feeling marginalized and disrespected, declared itself the National Assembly, vowing to draft a new constitution for France. This bold act signaled a refusal to accept the existing order, and on July 14, 1789, the storming of the Bastille became a symbol of the uprising against tyranny. The event marked the beginning of the French Revolution, as the people rose against centuries of oppression and sought to create a new society based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The National Assembly moved swiftly, dismantling the feudal system and declaring the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen in August 1789, which proclaimed the rights of all citizens and laid the groundwork for a new political order. However, the revolution was fraught with challenges, including internal divisions and external threats from monarchies fearing the spread of revolutionary ideals. By 1791, the situation had grown increasingly volatile. Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee France, hoping to rally support from foreign monarchs. However, their capture at Varennes revealed the king's betrayal, eroding any remaining trust in the monarchy. As the Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria in April 1792, the revolution entered a more radical phase with the rise of the Jacobins, who demanded even more radical changes. The September massacres of 1792 reflected the growing paranoia within revolutionary circles. Fearing counter-revolutionary plots, the populace turned on suspected traitors, resulting in widespread executions. In January 1793, Louis XVI was tried and executed by guillotine, a shocking act that stunned Europe and signified the definitive end of the monarchy. The Reign of Terror soon followed under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre, where the revolutionary government sought to eliminate perceived enemies of the state. Thousands were executed, including former allies of the revolution, as the Committee of Public Safety imposed draconian measures to maintain control. This atmosphere of fear and oppression culminated in Robespierre's fall in 1794, marking the end of the Reign of Terror and a shift towards a more moderate phase of the revolution. Amid the chaos of the revolution, a military leader emerged who would reshape not only France but the entire European continent, Napoleon Bonaparte. Born on August 15, 1769 on the island of Corsica, he quickly rose through the ranks of the French military due to his exceptional talent and ambition. By 1796, at just 27, he was appointed commander of the Army of Italy, where his brilliant military campaigns would establish him as a national hero. Napoleon's Italian campaign, which took place from 1796 to 1797, was marked by rapid victories against the Austrians and their allies, showcasing his tactical genius. He returned to France with immense popularity and set his sights on political power. In November 1799, amid the inefficiencies of the Directory, Napoleon staged a coup d'état, overthrowing the government and establishing himself as first consul. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor Napoleon I in a lavish ceremony at Notre Dame, signaling the establishment of a new imperial dynasty. Under his rule, Napoleon instituted numerous reforms, including the Napoleonic Code, which codified laws and established civil rights. He sought to expand French territory through a series of military campaigns, leading to a vast empire stretching across much of Europe. However, Napoleon's ambition also sowed the seeds of his downfall. His ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812, marked by harsh winters and fierce resistance, decimated his army. After suffering significant losses, he was forced to retreat, leading to widespread discontent among his allies and subjects. In 1814, facing a coalition of European powers united against him, Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba. But he escaped in 1815, returning to France for a brief period known as the 100 Days. However, he was ultimately defeated at the Battle of Waterloo and was exiled once more, this time to the remote island of St. Helena, where he lived until his death in 1821. The Congress of Vienna, held in 1814 to 1815, marked a pivotal moment in European history as the great powers convened to redraw the map of Europe after the defeat of Napoleon. The primary objective was to restore stability and balance of power, while suppressing revolutionary movements that had proliferated during the Napoleonic Wars. The delegates, led by figures such as Austrian Foreign Minister Clemens von Metternich, aimed to create a system that would prevent the rise of another figure like Napoleon. To achieve this, they reinstated monarchs who had been deposed and sought to balance the power among the major states: Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Great Britain. The arrangements included the creation of the German Confederation, a loose association of German states dominated by Austria and Prussia, and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which united Belgium and Holland. Poland was restored in part with much of its territory assigned to Russia, a decision that sowed the seeds of future conflict. However, the Congress did not resolve the underlying tensions that simmered across Europe. The repressive policies of the restored monarchies would soon be challenged by rising liberal and nationalist movements seeking reform and unity in their respective nations. The Industrial Revolution began in the late 18th century but gained unprecedented momentum throughout the 19th century, profoundly transforming Western Europe. This period marked a shift from agrarian economies to industrialized societies characterized by rapid advancements in technology, manufacturing, and transportation. The introduction of machinery, particularly the steam engine, revolutionized production processes, increasing efficiency and productivity. Factories emerged, bringing workers together under one roof to produce goods on a scale previously unimaginable. As industries grew, so did cities. Urbanization surged as people flocked to urban centers in search of work, leading to the rapid expansion of cities such as Manchester and Birmingham in Britain. However, this shift brought significant challenges, including overcrowded living conditions, poor sanitation, and the exploitation of labor, particularly of women and children. The Industrial Revolution also spurred significant social changes. A new working class emerged, and alongside it, a burgeoning middle class. These developments would lay the groundwork for social movements and political reforms, including labor rights and suffrage. The year 1848 is often referred to as the springtime of nations, as widespread revolutions erupted across Europe, driven by demands for liberal reforms, national self-determination, and social change. The dissatisfaction with autocratic rule and economic hardship catalyzed uprisings in France, the German states, Austria, and Italy. In France, the dissatisfaction with King Louis Philippe led to the February Revolution, resulting in his abdication and the establishment of the Second Republic. However, the provisional government struggled to address the needs of diverse factions, leading to conflict, particularly between moderate Republicans and radical socialists. The establishment of national workshops to provide employment ultimately failed, culminating in the June Days Uprising, which was brutally suppressed. Across the continent, revolutions aimed at unifying Germany and Italy were met with mixed results. In the German states, the Frankfurt Assembly convened to draft a constitution, but ultimately failed to achieve unity due to divisions over the inclusion of Austria. Prussian King Frederick William IV rejected the crown offered to him, leading to the disbandment of the assembly. In Italy, revolutionary fervor led to the expulsion of Austrian forces from Lombardy and the establishment of various republics. However, Austria quickly regained control, and the revolutions largely failed to produce lasting change. Yet, these uprisings laid the groundwork for future unification efforts in both Germany and Italy. The mid to late 19th century witnessed significant movements toward national unification in Italy and Germany. Italy's unification was driven by figures such as Giuseppe Mazzini, Count Camillo di Cavour, and Giuseppe Garibaldi. Cavour, as Prime Minister of Piedmont Sardinia, skillfully maneuvered through diplomacy and war to annex various Italian territories. The crucial turning point came in 1860, when Garibaldi's Expedition of the Thousand led to the unification of southern Italy with the Kingdom of the North. By the year 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was officially proclaimed, though Rome and Venetia remained outside its control until later. In Germany, Otto von Bismarck emerged as the architect of unification through blood and iron. He manipulated political events, including the wars against Denmark and Austria, to rally the German states around Prussia. The Franco-Prussian War, which took place from 1870 to 1871, solidified German unity. The southern German states allied with Prussia against a common enemy, leading to the proclamation of the German Empire in 1871. The newly formed German Empire under Kaiser Wilhelm I was dominated by Prussian militarism and industrial power. Bismarck established a complex system of alliances to secure Germany's position in Europe, emphasizing military readiness and economic strength. The Bundesrat, a federal council, and the Reichstag, the imperial diet, provided a framework for governance, although Prussia retained significant control. In contrast, the Third French Republic, established after the defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, faced numerous challenges, including political instability and economic difficulties. The Paris Commune of 1871 highlighted the deep divisions within France, as radical republicans clashed with conservative forces. Ultimately, the National Assembly reasserted control, leading to a more moderate and stable government, though tensions remained high as France sought to recover from its losses. During this period, Great Britain continued to expand its empire, becoming the foremost global power. The era was characterized by a belief in the superiority of British civilization and a sense of duty to civilize lesser nations, a sentiment often referred to as the white man's burden. This expansion was not without its challenges. However, Britain managed to maintain control through a combination of military might and diplomatic agreements, setting the stage for a complex relationship with its colonies. The Russian Empire, under the rule of czars such as Nicholas I and Alexander II, experienced its own transformations during the 19th century. Nicholas I's reign, from 1825 to 1855, was marked by autocratic rule, repression, and a series of conflicts, including the Crimean War, which exposed the empire's military weaknesses. Following Nicholas's death, Alexander II initiated significant reforms, including the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. This monumental change aimed to modernize Russia's economy and society, though it met with mixed results. The subsequent attempts to industrialize the economy led to social upheaval and increased calls for political reform, laying the groundwork for revolutionary movements that would erupt in the early 20th century.